I believe we are recording this session. So just to let you know, we will plan on recording the session, so if you want to escape, now's your chance. Otherwise, we hope you'll stay. Okay, so like I said, my name is Bonnie Fong, and this is the monthly STS Information Literacy Chat. We usually have these chats around the middle of the month. And this month, I'll be talking about identifying opportunities to teach more information literacy skills. I'm the physical sciences librarian and head of emerging technologies at my university, the Newark campus specifically. And I recently wrote a paper that summarized my experience working with a chemistry seminar course to introduce more information literacy skills into the course. That was a paper that was cited in the description that was sent out advertising this chat. I hope you all had a chance to read it. If not, and you don't have access to it, please just get in touch with me and I can send you a link to access that. So, since the title is Identifying Opportunities to Teach More Information Literacy Skills, the first thing we should think about is what is information literacy? Looking back at a couple of different places, specifically in ACRL, since the Science Technology section is part of the ACRL division, there is one definition stated in the Information Literacy Competency Standards for Higher Education from the year 2000. And they define information literacy as a set of abilities requiring individuals to recognize when information is needed and have the ability to locate, evaluate, and use effectively the needed information. And with the standards, I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with it, if not all. There's 5, and each one's listed with performance indicators and outcomes. The 5 standards are listed on the screen there. The first basically asks the student, can you determine the nature and extent of information needed? The second is about accessing that information effectively and efficiently. The third is more about evaluating information, but also incorporating that information into his or her knowledge base and value system. That latter part is one that is not often taught by librarians, the incorporation. That might be an opportunity for librarians to get involved. The fourth one, can students use information effectively to accomplish a specific purpose? Again, that could mean writing a paper, an oral presentation. The fifth one, understand many of the economic, legal, and social issues surrounding the use of information and access that information ethically and legally. So, my work with the chemistry seminar class began a few years ago, so that was before the framework came about. So this was much of what I focused on when I was thinking of how do I sneak in more information literacy skills for these students. Now, as many of you may know, the standards were adapted by different disciplines, one of which is the Science and Technologies section. And in 2006, we introduced the Information Literacy Standards for Science and Engineering or Technology. There's a link there. And you might also be aware that for some subject areas, they also work specifically on information literacy standards or information competencies. In the case for me, where I work a lot with the chemistry students, I took note of the information competencies for chemistry undergraduates. And that was put together by a few different organizations, one of which is SLA, the Special Libraries Association. So that link is available. So I think I mentioned before that this chat is being recorded, but the slides will also be provided on the Science and Technology section's Information Literacy Committee's chat guide. I think Lastly will probably provide that at the end of this session. Of course, more recently, there was the introduction of the Framework for Information Literacy for Higher Education, also by ACRL. And that looks at information literacy skills a little bit differently. There are 6 frames, and they happen to be listed in alphabetical order here. And each has knowledge practices and dispositions listed under there. So these 6 frames are relatively new to us, I think, and one of the things I hope we'll be able to discuss later is who's using them and how, and is that helping you to incorporate more information literacy in your teaching. So the 6 frames are: authority is constructed and contextual, information creation as a process, information has value, research as inquiry, scholarship as conversation, and searching as strategic exploration. So out of curiosity, having talked about information literacy and what the standards or the different frames are for it, and thinking about how you teach it in the class, I'm curious, what's the most popular request you receive for information literacy? Are you teaching students, I think A through E on the slide there has to do with the standards, and F through K has to do with the framework. I'm going to see if I can pull out a poll. I'm not sure that I can do a poll here. You know what? If you guys want to type in the chat box, which one is the most popular type of information literacy instruction you're invited to teach the students about? I'm just curious. Looks like most people are focusing on the standards, a lot of B's. Some D, some C. Always trying to get to H. Ah, yes. That's good to see one of the frames being used. But I think for myself, generally I'm invited to teach the students about using a database. How do they know how to filter? How do you make sure that it's only peer-reviewed sources? Oftentimes towards the end, how do you send the site? How do you get the citation so that I don't have to do it? Yes, Liz. Faculty usually explicitly request B, and we always try to sneak extra things in. Could be things from the framework, could be other aspects from the standards. Negotiating. G and J. Yes, there are ones that we might prefer, and I must say, I'm always told, I don't know if, I'm not sure there are many instances, and if there are, I could probably count them on one hand, where I wasn't specifically asked to show the students how to find articles and use databases to find articles. Every once in a while, we'll get requests for, can you teach the students how to evaluate information? Can you talk a little bit about plagiarism? But the focus is generally on B. Tell the students how to get this information. So that's okay. I mean, that's something the faculty are familiar with librarians doing, and that's a place to start. So with the chemistry seminar course, I'll just provide a little background information here. This course is actually made up of undergraduates and graduate students. The chemistry majors that are upper level are usually like in the 3rd or 4th year. And it's actually a 1-credit course for them, whereas for the newer graduate students, meaning usually in their 1st semester of graduate school, they actually are taking the same course, sitting next to the undergraduates, but getting 2 credits for the course. No idea how that came about, but that's just what it is. Now, the term project is a 20 to 25-minute oral presentation on a specific topic. Typically, it's part of a theme like green chemistry or nanotechnology. I think one time we allowed the students to pick their own, and it didn't quite work as well as suggesting, here's a list of 25 topics, choose your top 3, and then assigning them one based on their preferences. In terms of the time for the oral presentation, sometimes that depends on how many students are in the class. There have been years where it's been maybe about 17, and there's been years where there's been 32 or 33 students. So it's kind of hard to squeeze in all of the presentations at the end sometimes. So previously, meaning before I got heavily involved in the course, the chemistry seminar course would have a librarian come in for 2 sessions and talk specifically about searching a science database. Sometimes we were asked to just talk about Web of Science. Sometimes it was just SciFinder. And the first session was primarily teaching the students how to use it, and the second session was more the students spent time searching, and the librarians hung out in the room and answered questions that might have come up. And one professor used to teach this pretty regularly, but when he retired, a new professor began teaching it. And by new, I don't mean a new professor to the university, but just a different professor. This professor actually has been at Rutgers for a very long time. So hearing that a new professor would be teaching the course and having a little bit of experience with how the course had been taught before, I spoke with another professor about the idea of possibly adding a little bit more information literacy skills to the course. This professor happens to be one that approached the library to introduce his graduate students in his research group more about library resources. He found that they really didn't know a lot. They just were not up to speed on how to find literature in an efficient manner. So he actually approached us about teaching a mini course. I happened to be a new librarian at that time, and we talked a little bit about it. We came up with, I think, about 5 or 6 sessions for his students. And he really liked it. He thought that other graduate students would definitely benefit from this. So he told me about this chemistry seminar course and how newer graduate students took the course. And he introduced me to the professor that would be teaching it after the previous one retired. So we talked a little bit about expanding library involvement. And the professor was very receptive. I think part of the reason was because the course was kind of sprung on him a little late in the summer, and he wasn't quite really sure what to do, and he was appreciative of the fact that there was somebody else there to chat with and come up with ideas. And as we talked, he realized that there were a lot of things that the students were not taught within the curriculum. We came up with a list. Actually, let me try to get to the next slide there. We came up with a list of topics. Some were based on my research, looking through the literature to try and find out, what kinds of things do chemistry seminars consist of. It actually was pretty wide-ranging. A lot of them include literature searching and oral presentations, which is similar to the chemistry course on my campus, but some also did poster presentations and writing skills. Some talked about ethics, some focused on careers, technology, best practices in the laboratory, all over the place. What I've underlined on the slide there are things that I think are more typical to what librarians are involved with. So I did a little research in the literature. The professor did a little bit of thinking about what the students didn't get from the curriculum. He came up with other ideas such as chemistry software, like ChemDraw. He talked about Excel, PowerPoint. I thought more of information literacy skills, not just identifying specific databases, but also concepts. I snuck in data management, things like that. So we thought a little bit about the professor's perspective, what the students would need. Oftentimes, students are focused on immediate needs. They want to know what exactly they need to get an A in a class. You know, how do they get the best grade possible? And since their term project is to come up with an oral presentation that is based on their research into reading original research articles, that was their immediate goal. We had to cover that. But then the class actually didn't really have much other content that had to be taught. So there was some room there for us to add more information literacy sessions. The general setup of the class was the students came twice a week to class. One of those times they often sat in on a chemistry seminar put together by the department, which had scientists from around the world come and talk about their research. The second time that they came to class each week was for a class session. So what we wound up doing was taking, I think, an average of 6 to 8 class sessions and focusing on information literacy skills. The other sessions that were not chemistry seminar times were actually spent on the students presenting their oral presentations. So depending on the year, how many students, the number of sessions that were required for oral presentations could be lower or higher. So in any case, we identified a pretty long list of possible topics to cover, and we thought, well, let's find out what the students actually need. That's an important part of, I think, trying to introduce things. You want to make sure that they're actually helpful for the students. And we assess them at the beginning with a pre-course assessment that's available as a supplementary material for that article that I got in Science and Technology Libraries. So anyway, the pre-course assessed student confidence about different information literacy skills, their familiarity with different resources. It also included an open-ended question to ask the students what kind of challenges they face when looking for information. And after we assessed the students on the first day of class, we looked at the results and we made modifications to the syllabus as necessary. We usually came up with a draft syllabus, passed it out the first day of class, and told the students, based on their assessment, their pre-course assessment, we might make modifications as necessary. Throughout the course, we continue to assess student learning. I developed in-class exercises. Remember, this is a 1 or 2 credit course, so we didn't want the students to feel like they were being overwhelmed with work outside of class. So we had introduced some in-class exercises. We tried to introduce some interactive activities during class, some collaborative work. And if students had questions or it looked like students weren't quite understanding a specific point, we addressed them as they came up. At the end of the course, we had the students fill out a post-course assessment, which contained the same questions as the pre-course assessment in terms of how confident are you about XYZ, how knowledgeable are you about these multiple choice questions. Actually, they would check all that applied types of questions. And we also added a component that asked the students to evaluate the course, provide feedback about how helpful and how useful the course was. Specifically, you know, the in-class exercises, specifically the library sessions for completing their oral presentation projects, specifically how useful they felt this would be for the rest of their career at Rutgers and for their post-graduation career requirements or needs or desires. And of course, the professor and I also reflected on how things went. If there were areas that we felt could be improved, we changed things. And we actually, I think, changed at least one thing each semester. At the end of the semester, we say, this didn't really work that well. Next semester, let's do this. Or the students provided feedback that said they really want more practice with oral presentations. Let's allow for that, you know. So I felt like it was a really great experience because I had this professor who was open to changing things, improving things, and incorporating more information literacy skills. The article itself talks a lot more about exactly what we did, but I didn't want to just go through all of that in the chat here. I want to talk more about the idea of how do you find more opportunities. So based on my experience, I came up with some tips. One is to be aware of changes that are happening in the department that you're the liaison for. Someone's retiring, what's happening with their classes, especially if that person used to have you come and talk to their students about information literacy. Is someone new teaching the course? Make sure you introduce yourself, or even better, have the person who's retiring introduce you to that person. Similarly, if there's a new course that's being introduced, and it sounds like the students might have a need for information literacy skills, are they working on papers, are they doing research, try and find out a little bit more about the course and offer to help. I think that's a great opportunity for trying to add more IL into this class, because they're just starting to develop the course. They might be open to new ideas. They might like to have an extra brain on hand to bounce ideas off of. Another tip is to encourage others to help you promote the value of information literacy. We can talk as much as we like to faculty about information literacy and how it's important, but it's kind of biased. It's a biased view on our part. However, if other faculty members are saying how impressed they were with our session and how impressed they were with the results of those sessions, that person can be your advocate. That's kind of what happened with me in the chemistry department. I worked with that one professor with his research group, and he wanted to help introduce me to the professor teaching the chemistry seminar course, and great things came of it. In another department, I spoke with the students in one assistant professor's course about how to find articles because they were writing papers. She mentioned it to the head of the department, and he said he would tell the rest of his faculty to visit the library, to have a librarian come and talk to his students. He actually had me in one of his classes, so that's really helpful. Another thing I cannot emphasize enough is to be a good listener. We really need to find out what the needs are of the faculty and the students. That's why assessment is really important, but also just listening to what the goals of the course are, that's really important. We can always make suggestions, but definitely don't push your own agenda. Faculty are used to academic freedom. They don't want to feel like they're being pushed around. And of course, continue to improve your information literacy instruction. In addition to assessing students, I often follow up with professors and ask them, what went well, what didn't, and I ask them for suggestions for improvement. I think that if they know that you're constantly trying to improve what you're doing, that you really care, and they'll be more likely to have you come back. So that's kind of just my introduction to my experiences. But since this is a chat, the goal is to have everybody learn from each other. So I'm happy to take questions about the part that I just talked about. Feel free to type in the chat. But I'd also really love to find out more about your ideas, what's working where you are. Any questions for me? If not, how about you guys? There are, I believe, 43 of you. Who has found a way to teach more information literacy? I'm going to see if I can give you mic privileges. Let's see. I'm not sure I can. Anthony, do you know how to give mic privileges to the attendees?
I'm not sure. That might be something only you are.
In the meantime, let's take a quick peek at the chat there. Paul, what's the LIBR course? Linda, I would also love to know what folks are doing in physics. It's very hard to get into courses there. Even the writing intensive class, I asked the department chair, well, what are the students doing? Don't they need library skills? And I was told, no, they do not. Edward, that's great, flipped classroom. Edward, when you have the students focus on topic development, do you have them work in groups? I was just reading Matt's comment, having more luck with departments that aren't in his area. Matt, maybe the faculty in those departments could talk to the ones who are in your department. Annie, you mentioned that when teachers are working on flipping their classes, they're more interested in you. How come? Is it because of your tech skills? Or are they just trying to find tutorials that you can suggest? John, you mentioned math writing courses. I agree that it's more about proofwriting. I'll have to see if there's any other place that I could chat with the students about information literacy skills there. Wow, Paul, that's great. A 15% increase in graduate completion when they take the information literacy course that's mandatory for the RN BSN program. That's really great. Amanda, you mentioned workshops hosted by faculty. Is that like a Center for Teaching and Learning type of workshop? I'm just curious if it was sponsored by his department or her department, or it was a Center for Learning or Center for Teaching and Learning. Oh, Linda, that's a great idea. Yeah, might write like a mini lit review. The chemistry writing course, which is a writing intensive course on campus, they actually do write kind of like a review paper for their writing intensive course. And actually, that's a class where I've tried to introduce a little bit more of the synthesizing information and the writing component. Not that I teach them how to write per se, but in the past, I've worked with the students to show them, this is an example of not a very good way of writing in the sciences, and this is a better example of writing in the sciences. Problem-based learning in the chemistry, nursing, and nutrition programs. That's great. Hmm. Yeah, Annie, bibliographic management tools are really popular. We have RefWorks at Rutgers, and sometimes even the English 101 faculty, just because they've heard of the tool, they want us to show their students RefWorks. It's a little surprising to me because at that level, I don't think that it's necessarily going to be used a lot, but at least the students are exposed to it. Thank you, William, for sharing that paper. Sorry, guys, I'm a little slow. Let's see, badging. There was a question about badging. Oh, okay, those are digital badges. Okay. Courtney, you mentioned that you focus more on concepts rather than just showing tools and databases. Is that something that the faculty like, or do they seem really interested in having the students do hands-on work with the databases? My experience with the faculty on my campus is that they really want hands-on experience. Sometimes when the students are not given enough hands-on experience, that's a comment I get from faculty. Next time it could be better improved if you give them more time to search. And I can kind of understand that. Oftentimes I'll tell the students, the goal of your hands-on searching is that you leave here with one book and one article, or whatever it is that they're looking for. If it's just scholarly articles, I say 2 articles. And then I just have a raise your hand if you found 1 article at the end of class, or raise your hand if you found 2 articles. And that usually is pretty satisfying because then you feel like the students were able to accomplish that goal and they're halfway done with finding articles for their paper. And plus the faculty members are happy because they feel like they didn't just lose a class session, but their students are actually moving forward on their papers. Annie mentioned some of the demos that she does for the flipped classroom, and then she says she can usually convince instructors to talk about other things too. Yeah, that's how we work, right? we go in, we do what the professor wants, we sneak in a little bit here and there. We might recognize from student feedback or student comments that there's a need for something extra, and then we can say, well, we could do that too. Thanks, William, for sharing the other thing about physics education. Courtney, that's really great that the faculty want you to lead the discussion on concepts. I guess sometimes when we do teach, we do talk about the concepts and don't really focus on them per se, or at least not too much time, because we have to make sure we leave time for hands-on work. But it is important to try and sneak in the bigger picture concepts. You mentioned primary versus secondary sources, exceedingly important in the sciences. Students don't necessarily, I guess, translate primary and secondary sources from their English classes, for example, into science. So, So I've been reading through the chat and I'm finally caught up. There are a lot of great things that you guys are doing. Great job. Now, in terms of trying to find ways to teach more information literacy, do you have tips for doing that, ideas for doing that? I mean, for me, sometimes it's just sneaking in. You know, here's a short 2 or 3 minute spiel about this concept, even though I know we want to focus more on the hands-on work. Sometimes it's about things that really aren't covered in the curriculum, and sometimes the faculty doesn't feel quite that comfortable teaching it. Like, for example, writing intensive courses in the sciences, a lot of us who are in the sciences, I'm talking about myself included because I was a chemistry major, a lot of us went into the sciences because we weren't too thrilled with writing, you know. And so sometimes the faculty in the sciences might not feel that comfortable about the writing skills part. So I might offer to talk a little bit more about the writing idea of how to be concise in chemistry, you know, how to structure your paragraphs, stuff like that. Of course, this is something that maybe the Writing Center would be willing to work with the faculty on. I'm not really sure. I guess it depends on each university and what the Writing Center does and doesn't do. But I mean, synthesizing information and presenting it in a certain fashion is part of information literacy skills. Some people will talk about poster sessions before the chemistry writing course. Also included not just writing, but a poster presentation. So when I worked with the professor that kept the poster sessions as part of the course requirements, I spoke with the students about designing a good poster in the sciences. We looked at examples of science posters online. We talked about the idea of how people read a poster when you're all standing next to posters and people are trying to get through. Should you go across the top and then across the bottom, or should you really go up and down, up and down? How and other stuff like color scheme, how large should the letters be, stuff like that. Let's see. So yeah, if you guys have ideas for how to teach more information literacy, please share. Edward mentioned using screencasts to cover basic skills outside of class. I guess those could be flipped classroom items. It could be online teaching learning objects, digital learning objects. Could be linked to your LibGuide or subject guide. Matt, I totally understand. I mean, we learn to write better, but it's not our forte, and it's probably not the forte of a lot of science folks. Oh yeah, the course management system. We have a few actually at Rutgers. We use Blackboard, Sakai, eCollege, Moodle, and in Blackboard we've recently been including a libraries module within the course site. Not just a tab at the top that says libraries, but also a module along the side. And from the faculty view, it actually says, if you would like us to modify this page or this module for the specific needs of your class, contact your subject specialist librarian, and we include a link so that they can click on it and find us. But I haven't heard of anybody actually doing that. Oh, I must have missed a piece on gains. So there's a bit in the chat box about gains. Sorry, I missed that piece before. And thank you for mentioning one of the frameworks, the new frames. I think they do sound really interesting, and a lot of students might not think of these sort of concepts. Scholarship as a conversation. When the frames first came out, and I was chatting about them with other librarians, we were saying how some of these things, it's stuff that you don't really learn until perhaps at the end of your graduate career. Some of them are just that, I guess, higher order thinking, or something that you just don't connect until you've been doing research for a while. Ooh, amazing research raise for human physiology. Thanks for sharing that, Annie. Oh, yes, John. The chat transcript can be shared with the list. We'll try and figure out how to make it a Google Doc so that people can just click on the link. Matt, what do you mean by finished products? Papers or the results of in-class exercises? Oh, an actual tutorial professor can assign. And would the tutorial end with like a graded quiz? Hmm, cool. Yeah, I think that when I assess the students and I let the faculty know how they did, they're always curious. I think they themselves are also wondering, was the time that they gave up from teaching to bringing the students to the library to learn about library skills instead of like subject matter, they're also curious, was it worth it? And we of course hope that it was and that the students are writing better papers, but sometimes it's nice to be able to show them, you know, here were our objectives for the day, and these are the ones that they were able to accomplish. You know, before we talked, they thought X, Y, Z, and by the end, they learned that some ABC was correct instead, something like that. Okay, thanks, Matt. It was the ACRL doc for new physics liaisons. Cool. So do folks have tips for us about how we might be able to teach more IO? You know, what was most helpful in getting you to do that? Some of you guys are talking about teaching more ILL through the use of kind of supplementary materials or, oh, and crowdsourcing. Oh, okay. In this sense, I'm just saying I want to learn from you guys and share ideas that you had. So I'm grabbing the crowd and asking you guys to share some successful ideas or thoughts. That's kind of it. Edward, I absolutely agree. The basic stuff, you wish that the students could do it on their own time, maybe as homework or something like that. But unless the faculty member is willing to assign a percentage of the student's grade towards it, I just don't know if the students would do it. I agree, the higher level stuff should belong in the classroom. That's probably one of the best uses of our time and their time, the students' time. But it's not easy unless I think the students feel like they're going to be held accountable for learning it beforehand. John, I think that's true. We'd love to teach more, but quality is better than quantity. And if your question is still about crowdsourcing, I guess I could say it's like using the crowd as a source of ideas. Oh, thanks, Matt, for sharing that. I believe that is freely available, right? Michael Fosmeyer's Sudden Selector's Guide to Physics. Okay, thanks, Matt. It is open access. Ah, I've used this with Dr. X, and we really were pleased with the results. That's good. I feel like we should get a brochure and quote the faculty and send out the brochure, but I don't know. Oh, okay, and a YouTube too. I think one time when I sent out one of my regular emails to faculty updating them about library changes, etc., I've written and shown an example of like a LibGuide that I've done for a course. I think it's something along the lines of how, and by the way, don't forget, I provide support for not just your research, but also for teaching. And here's an example of a guide I put together for an undergraduate course, and I could do one for your class and come talk to your students too. But I must say, I don't think anybody ever responded to that and said, I'd like you to come and talk to my class. I think the faculty's word of mouth with each other is very helpful. Oh, Annie, yeah, graduate student orientation. That's a great time. Even the undergrad student orientation. I know that they're kind of crazy inundated with information that day, but I think the most important thing for the students to remember at that point is just that we exist and that we're there to help them. I know that some libraries have this idea of personal librarian, so theoretically, if you introduce the students to the idea that their liaison librarian should be considered their quote-unquote personal librarian, that might be something that they remember from that time. I believe with our graduate student orientation, we pass out a flyer where we have all of the librarians listed on one side with pictures, and in the back, all of the different subject areas are listed with our names and email addresses next to it. John, I think you're right. Being a little bit pushy is okay. Well, we have a few minutes left. I'm open to different topics. If anybody wants to ask a question, want advice from the other folks present, like I said, this is a chat. It's a discussion. We could talk a little bit more about tips, what we think was most helpful in getting us to teach more IL. Oh, Courtney, yes. When a faculty member says it, when a professor says it, it just means more for the students. That's just the way they think. And I'm always very appreciative when the faculty member who invited me to his or her class introduces me and emphasizes how integral we are to the students' education and, you know, their success in writing their paper. Because if they need to use scholarly sources, they need to know how to find those sources. Well, I'm just going to move one slide over for my references. These are a couple of the articles I mentioned during my presentation. The first is the one that was sent along with the description for our chat. The second is the one that I co-wrote with a professor about working with his research groups. Let me see if I can find a link to the STS Information Literacy Committee's chat guide. This is where the chat recording will be posted. And we did have a request before for the chat transcript as well, so we can add that there, and of course the slides. All right. Well, we are approaching 4 o'clock, so Eastern time. So I just want to thank you all for attending today. I learned a lot. I hope you guys did as well. And I believe there's another chat already scheduled for next month. Let me see if I can find in my email when that is. Then at least I could give you a heads up. Okay, it should be on March 14th. And it's going to be about teaching math information literacy. Now, how many guesses to why that topic on that date? Yeah, that's right, Pi Day. So I don't know if people want to bring pie while they listen and participate in the discussion. I don't know, up to you guys. But thank you all again for coming. And we will, I think, probably send another message out to the listservs just to let you guys know when the archive of the chat is available and the other stuff, presentation, PowerPoint slide, and chat transcript. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks so much, Bonnie.
Thank you.